Welcome to Southwark, London, in 1550. Using AI reconstructions based on Anton van den Wyngaerde's panorama of London from around 1544, we'll explore how Southwark may have appeared in the middle of the Tudor period, comparing its streets, buildings and landmarks with the area we see today. Southwark was one of the most beguiling, raucous and subversive districts of Tudor London, and nowhere was this more evident than in 1550. Connected to the city by the ancient London Bridge, it stood on the south bank of the Thames, beyond the direct jurisdiction of the City of London, and subject instead to a patchwork of liberties and manorial authorities. With the constant flow of travellers and merchants arriving from southern England and the continent, its numerous inns, taverns and crowded streets made it a hotspot of commerce, entertainment, revelry and crime. It was a place where wealth and poverty, respectability and vice lived side by side. In 1550, Edward VI was in the fourth year of his reign. England was still reeling from the upheavals of his father, Henry VIII. The break with Rome, the suppression of the monasteries, and the establishment of royal supremacy had all transformed the kingdom. Few places felt these changes more keenly, where old religious institutions, thriving commerce, and the restless energy of Tudor London merged on the city's southern fringe. Borough High Street was a dense, chaotic corridor, where livestock and market stalls jostled for space beneath rows of courtyard inns, workshops, and tightly packed premises. It was home to one of London's busiest markets, located at the entrance to London Bridge. Borough Market today, now set just west of the High Street, remains a major trading place and visitor destination. One of the most interesting buildings along the High Street was Suffolk Place, a vast palace-like Renaissance structure located opposite St George's Church. It was built in 1522 by Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, who had married Henry VIII's sister Mary. Designed in a fashionable continental style, it was a striking and imposing landmark. Henry VIII later acquired the property and in 1536 granted it to his then-wife Jane Seymour. By 1550, Suffolk Place still stood as a grand Crown-owned residence. Today, office space occupies the same location adjacent to Borough Tube Station. Opposite Suffolk Place was the medieval parish church of St George the Martyr. It fell into disrepair in the 17th century and was rebuilt in the 1730s. As it broadly does today, the church occupied a key corner linking the High Street with routes east towards Kent via what is today's Old Kent Road and Long Lane. Bermondsey Abbey and St Mary Magdalene stood at the eastern end of Long Lane. By this time, the priory had been dissolved under Henry VIII and no longer housed a monastic community. Today, the Abbey area is occupied by the modern Bermondsey Square development, opposite the churchyard of St Mary Magdalene. This is St Mary Overy, or St Saviour's Church as it would become known. It sits upon Southwark's oldest religious site, dated to well before the 11th century. It became an Augustinian priory in the medieval period, and then, during the upheavals of the Reformation, it was taken into the hands of Henry VIII and stripped of its monastic function. Following the dissolution, the priory church became the parish church of St Saviour, serving the local community while retaining much of its medieval character. Today, preserved in much the same form that Tudor Londoners would have recognised, it is known as Southwark Cathedral. It would later become closely associated with the world of William Shakespeare, who worked in Southwark's theatre district, and with his brother Edmund, who was buried there. It also connects to John Harvard, who was baptized at St Saviour's in 1607 and grew up in the area before emigrating to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1637. There he would make a bequest to New College, helping establish what would become Harvard University. Beside St Saviour's stood Winchester House and the surrounding Liberty, one of Southwark's most significant extra-jurisdictional enclaves, where authority rested with the bishops of Winchester. Within the Liberty, civic oversight was limited. The area became closely associated with the so-called stews, brothels operating under strict episcopal regulation. This arrangement allowed Crown and Church to contain, tax and tolerate activities banned within the city itself. Despite Henry VIII's abolition of this legal framework in 1546, the practice quickly re-emerged following his death in 1547, operating without formal licensing and under considerably less regulation. The women who worked in the stews, known commonly as the Winchester geese, were largely excluded from parish burials. Some were buried at what is now remembered as the Crossbones Burial Ground. Today, the area remains preserved and is commemorated through periodic vigils marking that history. The Stews area today is a network of small streets west of Borough Market. Some road names still preserve echoes of its past. Beyond the Stews, Bankside was a place of industry as well as entertainment. Wharves and landing stages lined the Thames, where barges unloaded timber, grain, stone, and other goods destined for the city across the river. Breweries, warehouses, and workshops stood alongside taverns that catered to watermen, labourers, and travellers. Open spaces near the river also hosted popular licensed blood sports, including bear and bull baiting, long-established forms of entertainment that drew large crowds well before the famous Elizabethan theatres appeared. The district's mixture of commerce, manual labour, and licensed recreation gave Bankside an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in London. The Southwark of 1550 was on the cusp of dramatic change. Over the latter half of the 16th century, the borough's population grew rapidly, new streets and buildings filled the landscape, and Bankside emerged as London's principal centre for theatres, bear baiting and other popular entertainments. Today, the west gable wall of Winchester House still stands, dating from around 1340 when it formed part of the Great Hall. Just west of Winchester House stood the notorious Clink Prison. Operating in various forms from the 12th century until 1780, it served the bishop's jurisdiction. Alongside debtors, thieves and drunkards, its cells in the 1550s increasingly held religious dissenters and political prisoners caught up in the upheavals of the Reformation. Run as much for profit as for justice, the Clink was bleak, damp and cramped. Prisoners were expected to pay for their own keep, and those without means languished in filth and were vulnerable to disease, starvation and prison brutality. Let's now focus on this eastern section of the High Street. To cater for the many travellers, the High Street was home to a dense array of taverns and courtyard inns. We know from records that the King's Head, the George, the Tabard, and the White Hart were just a few of the establishments situated along this stretch. The Tabard was perhaps the most well-known, depicted a few years later in the Civitas Londinium survey of London in the 1560s. It was also mentioned in the 14th century Canterbury Tales. Today, the yard where the inn stood is still evident in the same location and commemorated, but the inn itself was eventually demolished in the 1870s. Adjacent to it stands the George Inn, London's last surviving galleried coaching inn. Although it has been rebuilt several times over the centuries, it still preserves its traditional courtyard layout, offering the closest glimpse of the medieval inns that once lined the high street. Along the road, we can still see many of the entrances, yards and pubs still operating, even though much of their 16th century structures are long gone. Marshalsea Prison stood just north of St George the Martyr, close to what is now Borough High Street. It was originally a royal prison of the Marshalsea Court, and by the mid-16th century it held a mixture of debtors, admiralty prisoners, and those accused of offences under royal jurisdiction. Crowded, harsh, and closely tied to the commercial life of the surrounding streets, it reflected the precarious edge of Tudor society, where credit, commerce, and debt could quickly end in confinement. The medieval prison was rebuilt on a nearby site in 1811, continuing to operate as a debtor's prison until its closure in 1842. The southern boundary wall of this later 19th century prison survives today and can still be seen near Angel Place. Wyngaerde's map places St Thomas's Hospital around here. Founded in the 12th century by the Augustinian canons and dedicated to St Thomas Becket, the martyred Archbishop of Canterbury, it was a charitable house caring for local patients. It remained a fixture of Southwark life for centuries. It was dissolved under Henry VIII during the Reformation as part of the wider suppression of religious houses, bringing its medical role to an abrupt end. But the loss of medical care in the borough proved unsustainable as the sick and dying lay helpless on the streets. It was refounded under Edward VI in 1551, restoring its function as a civic institution in a newly Protestant London. The original site lay around modern-day St Thomas's Street, an area later associated with the medical training of poet John Keats. Today, the original site lies close to Guy's Hospital, while St Thomas's Hospital itself stands further west in Lambeth, where it continues its work nearly 9 centuries after its foundation. During the 1530s, the reformer Miles Coverdale is believed to have worked here while preparing what became the first complete printed English Bible. Whether all of the translation was undertaken within the hospital itself remains uncertain, but the association reflects the borough's growing role as a centre of religious change during the final years of Henry VIII's reign. This modern aerial view of Borough High Street shows just how closely the layout of the 16th century and 21st century high streets compare. Southwark Cathedral and St George's Church still mark the northern and southern ends of the street. Between them once stood Suffolk Place, Marshalsea Prison, the Tabard and George Inns, St Thomas's Hospital, Winchester House, and the Stews district. This view also helps us understand how Wyngaerde's panorama compressed the landscape, depicting these landmarks much closer together than they actually were. Much of Tudor Southwark has long since disappeared beneath later streets, railways, and Victorian rebuilding. Yet beneath the modern city, its medieval street pattern, ancient churches and fragments of palace walls, prisons and inns still survive. Together, they reveal a borough that stood apart from the City of London, a place of commerce and poverty, devotion and vice, where privilege and liberty existed alongside royal authority. Though the sights and sounds have changed, Southwark remains one of London's most distinctive historic landscapes, where echoes of the Tudor world can still be discovered. Southwark has never stood still, yet its remarkable past remains woven into the fabric of modern London. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for future installments of fascinating London history enriched through the lens of AI.